Hey, it's ODB from OLP, and we're here to talk about the cover to the right and how it ties into the cover to the left. 20 years ago this month, March of 2003, Jimmy Graham's Hardbody graces the cover of Street Trucks magazine. I talked to Jimmy yesterday, and we were sitting down having lunch, just kind of hanging out a few minutes, and I basically was able to confirm a few things I think that I've talked to him over the years about and maybe slipped my memory, but I want to kind of go into those details. What we'll do here is look at potentially, I'm going to go into this feature first, I think, Street Trucks, and then I'm going to show you what his truck originally looked like, and then we'll talk about where it was shot. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this. A shorter video overall. Thanks for the support. Make sure you subscribe. Let's jump right in. Circa 20 years ago, probably late, maybe fall to late 2002, Jimmy links up with Joe Greaves. They had basically started to kind of build a good relationship in terms of shooting stuff that either Jimmy had built or, Joe's stomping ground was kind of the East Coast, including where this truck was shot. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But basically, when Jimmy's truck was originally built, I'm going to show you guys what it looked like when it was first featured. Shortly after, like a week after it was featured, he decided that he wanted to tear this thing apart. Now, granted, back in those days, the features did take a little while to run, which I think is what you're going to see when I show you this and kind of line up all these dates. But basically, this is Jimmy Graham of Jimmy's Rod and Customs, his 87 Nissan Hardbody. Of course, it does have a Frontier front end on it. And Joe Greaves has shot a lot of stuff. I mean, he's been shooting, he did time in the military, and I want to say maybe since the 70s or before. I mean, Joe was old school. I mean, a true definition of old school guy, real cool dude. And Jimmy linked up with him up in, I always get this wrong, I want to say it's St. Augustine area is where Joe has lived a long time. And every time I would open this, I would always think of Daytona Beach because Jimmy's in Edgewater. You just think Daytona, you see the beach, but this was up further north, and a lot of guys would go up to Joe because Joe would say, hey, if you could come up here, I got a place to shoot it, and that's what they did. When Jimmy rebuilt this truck, it truly was a work of art. The full frame was powder coated, and guys were kind of doing that. It was really something you weren't seeing a lot in the mini truck scene at that time. And with body drops becoming really popular in the mid to late 90s, and then of course into the early 2000s, a lot of guys were like, you ain't gonna see it. Who cares? I just want a low truck. But when Jimmy rebuilt this thing, he really took it to the next level. Joe did a great shot. Shoot here, you can see there on the back window, I'll talk a little bit, and then the front SMC Scraping Customs, that's where Jimmy originally worked after, he was doing stuff on his own in the beginning. And basically Will had hired Shane and Jimmy, and they were building a lot of cool stuff, including eventually Chick's Ride. But this is the famed truck. Now, has a lot of mods to it, a lot of stereo, full interior, again, powder-coated frame. I like the way Street Trucks did this as well. They wrapped all the text. Kind of a cool little deal there. You can see the suicide door, their 4Runner rear bumper tucked in and things like that. Still too high. I want to say one of his buddies had a Mazda that had a tag similar to it. They had, that was kind of the thing that guys were doing with their tags at that time, different vanity plates similar to that. Always wanted to go lower, but you can see again, Scraping Customs, SNC for short, which is on the front there. This truck was sold, Jimmy had confirmed, and I think I've talked to him a couple times about it, it was sold to an Ohio car dealer. That's where, in my mind, I always remember where it probably is, but Jimmy had confirmed when he was at Halfway Havoc years ago, I think that was the show where they had all the cover trucks, that a guy came up to Jimmy and said, my best friend or my friend has your old truck. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot, you did tell me that. And Jimmy said that after the show, the guy had sent him, probably back then, presumably through email, maybe a picture message, but sent him photos, and he confirmed, yeah, the guy had it. But I say all that because if you guys know where this truck is at, Jimmy would love to buy it back, or we'd love to know what the fate of it was. If the dealer bought it in Ohio and sold it to that guy, maybe it's still in his garage. Again, the dealer was in Ohio, but here you can see a good rolling shot. Jimmy doesn't like to be photographed, I don't think, so that was perfect there for Joe to get him behind the A-pillar. Jimmy loved juice. That will tie into his first feature that I'm going to show you in a second. And you can see the full custom dash with the pods and the billet. Jimmy is building some of the baddest vehicles today, and although he doesn't necessarily do it for the recognition, he does it, for the love of it. He's a very talented guy. The crazy thing about this was, you see the ST there, so that's the indication that that's the end of the feature. But something to keep in mind is I think I'd have to go back because I can rattle off the first 5 or 6 trucks on the cover that were mini trucks of street trucks. This might have been the first import technically. Now, I know you could say, hey, Paul Davis, but Jimmy and I were talking about it. I think technically the Ombre, although it was an Isuzu, I think it kind of was considered a GM product. But either way, you could slice or dice it. It's one of the first, I'd say definitely 10 mini trucks on the cover of street trucks, which was definitely an accomplishment back then, and it really still is today. Let's look at what it used to be, what it looked like in the first feature, and then I'll show you where we're pretty sure it was shot. I'm pretty sure after talking to Jimmy. Now, we just went through this flip through recently, so you may recognize this if you've been watching all of the magazines. We're going through every issue. November 2000, Jim and Juice. This was Jimmy's truck, and this was always intriguing to me because although I've been friends with Jimmy 20 years, I've been, talking with him, and obviously, built my truck and became closer friends with him. I really put, our friendship utmost respect. I mean, he's just the true professional, a really, really good guy. But I never talked to him a lot about the early days of his truck. There's a few photos that float around when it had like maybe a primered bed, and it was like a seafoam green, I want to say. But this is when it really came together and it was featured. Now, I do believe somewhere in here, every time I always look for it, I actually don't think that they mentioned who shot it. But Jimmy confirmed Lance did shoot this truck. So sometimes, especially in this era, they would negate, or they would leave out like the little writing here on, feature or photography by. So tip of the cap to Lance. Lance shot this truck. Now, you would say, hey, November 2000, probably shot earlier that year, which I'm pretty certain I got confirmation, well, at least in my head, after talking to Jimmy, where it was shot. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can see he's got the old school kind of graphics by today's standards. He's got the trim there on the wheels, nice looking wheel, KMC wheel there. If you didn't know, you got the topper. And then at the time, he was in New Movement, which was a club. I don't know if they're technically still around. But Jimmy was building super clean stuff back then. This is kind of more, again, just as a home builder at that time, in my understanding. And you can see all the tweed. Jimmy loved Juice, which you saw a second ago. Technically in street trucks, it was still on Juice. And that's a cool name. Ties into like gin and juice. From the Snoop song that was still even popular, and still popular now, because this week, I guess technically this past week, but within the last 7 days, the entire catalog of Death Row Records is back streaming. It's kind of funny how Snoop basically takes it away once he acquires the label, and then now he's like a savior for bringing it back. It's kind of funny how you can control the message there and make it seem like, oh, thank you, Snoop. If he wouldn't have taken it away in the first place, we wouldn't be at this point. But Gin and Juice, Jim and Juice, you can see the play on words there. Now, I had assumed Joe Greaves had shot this because, again, Jimmy had forged that relationship with him, and I know Joe has been shooting stuff up and down the East Coast for years, decades. And but he confirmed that Lance did shoot it. Now, I always was curious where it was shot, and I'm going to show you that now. It kind of looks like a house or like a little building there in the background. Let's look at, I was able to figure it out based upon my database after talking to Jimmy. Southeast Customs, but it was Southeastern Nationals. You see right here. Southeastern Nationals was a show I went to maybe a couple years. My buddy Marlon, I think technically debuted his S10 there back in 2000, 2001. This year, I did not go to the show. It was 1999. So it ran, the show coverage ran, and if I remember correctly, this show was around like the springtime. So that would give it the perfect lead up, that 5-6 issue lead to get to October 99. And if you look right here, they had kind of put a little photography trickery, what they would do in those days. You got the little mirror image there. But you could see the truck looked exactly like that. And Jimmy had, he had confirmed, because I asked him, I said, where was it shot at? He goes, it was shot at Southeastern Nationals. And I go, okay. I remember it was in show coverage. Again, I wasn't there this year, but there it is. So I'm fairly confident. Now, technically, you could say, well, Jay, what if it was shot? It is possible that Jimmy will come back when he doesn't text right back. Maybe if he's working, he might come back and go, well, no, it was shot the following year. But he did tell me, I asked him how soon after this thing getting shot did you decide to rebuild it? And he said within a week. So, technically, and if it was shot, he would have started rebuilding it early 99, going through the major transformation, which we end up seeing when it hits this level on the cover of Street Trucks. So there you have it. I love to be able to tie some of the stories together. So Southeastern Nationals, early springtime, maybe it was May. It was around that era. I know in 2000, 2001 when I went, I went to Showfest 2000. So it wasn't definitely mid-May, but it may have been like March, April, May time period. It gets shot. Lance shoots it. Again, we do not see Lance's name unless I'm missing it. I do not see it there. Again, that was sometimes omitted for whatever reason, and then it landed on the cover. So shout out to Jimmy at Jimmy's Running Customs. Great guy and an amazing builder. He's really, really, really done some cool stuff over the years. Sometimes I'll put some Easter eggs in here. You guys will notice something era specific, kind of early 2000s, maybe not 2000 exactly, but you guys will remember some of these old phones. Got a little collection. Of course, I'm a hoarder. You guys know that, I think. But the first step is admitting, right? Right, Ed Eister, you got to admit it. Thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing. I'm going to flash now if you want to click through to the next video. And I'll also flash now if you want to subscribe if you're new. We've seen great growth over the past few months. Thank you guys. Stay on the rise. Peace.